My name is Daniel Carter. I'm from a small town in Ohio where respect is earned, not handed out, but that's something my brother, Jake, never understood. On my mom's birthday, with our whole family gathered, he shoved his finger in my face and yelled, "You're a loser, Danny. You've been living off everyone else for years, get out of this house." His voice echoed in the living room, and everyone froze. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from rage. Because I knew the truth. And before I could speak, someone else pushed back their chair and walked out instead. Moral setup: sometimes the person who leaves the room isn't the one being pushed, it's the one who finally sees the truth. What happened that night changed everything in my family. And if you've ever been called worthless by someone you love, you need to hear this. Jake's voice cut through the room like a blade. You think just because you're mom's favorite, you can sit here and freeload while the rest of us work for a living? His tone dripped with venom, his chest puffed like he was ready to throw me out himself. The smell of birthday cake still hung in the air, but no one was smiling anymore. My fork was still in my hand, frozen halfway to my mouth. I tried to keep my voice calm, but it came out tight. "Jake, you really want to do this here? On mom's birthday?" He smirked. "Oh, don't play the victim. You've been leeching off her for months. You can't keep a steady job. You can't pay your bills. And now, you're sitting here acting like you belong? You don't. You never did." My chest burned. "You have no idea what I've been through." "I don't need to," he snapped, cutting me off before I could finish. "We all see it, Danny. You're a failure. And you're dragging mom down with you." I looked around the table. My cousins stared into their plates, pretending not to hear. My aunt cleared her throat but didn't say a word. And Mom? Mom just sat there, eyes darting between us, her hands clutching her napkin so tightly the paper tore. I could feel my heart pounding in my ears. "Say that again," I dared him, leaning forward. Jake grinned, like this was the moment he'd been waiting for. "You are a loser." The word slammed into me harder than a punch, but I didn't flinch. I pushed my chair back slowly, the legs scraping the floor like nails on a chalkboard. "You've had everything handed to you your whole life," I said, my voice low but sharp. "Dad's money. Mom's patience. Even your job, you got it because of Uncle Ray. And you've got the nerve to call me a loser?" Jake's face flushed red. "At least I can hold a job. At least I don't hide behind excuses while everyone else cleans up my messes." "Mess?" I barked out a bitter laugh. "You wouldn't know a mess if it slapped you in the face. You think you're better than me because you've got a bigger paycheck? Because you drive a new truck? You have no idea what real struggle looks like." By now, the room was holding its breath. Even the kids in the other room had gone quiet. "That's enough." Mom's voice cracked through the tension, but Jake ignored her, stepping closer until we were nose to nose. "Get out, Danny," he said again, slower this time, like he wanted the words to cut deeper. "Right now." And that's when it happened. A chair scraped loudly across the floor, but it wasn't mine. We all turned to see Mom standing up, her plate untouched, her face pale but her jaw set like stone. She didn't even look at me. She looked at Jake. "You're right," she said softly, her voice trembling. "Someone does need to leave this house." Jake smirked, thinking he'd won. Finally. But Mom's next words made the whole room gasp. "You. Get out." The color drained from his face. "What?" "You heard me, Jake," she said, her voice steady now. "Get your things and go." The air felt like it had been sucked out of the room. Jake blinked, like he couldn't process what she just said. "You're kicking me out? For him?" For this, he jabbed a finger in my direction. "This failure?" Mom's eyes narrowed. "Don't you dare speak about your brother like that. You've been disrespectful, arrogant, and cruel. You've treated him like trash because you think you're better, but you're not. You've done nothing but tear people down to make yourself feel bigger. And I'm done watching it. Jake laughed, but it was bitter, shaky. You're unbelievable. I'm the one who's been helping you pay your bills. And I'm grateful, Mom cut in sharply. But money doesn't excuse cruelty. It never has, and it never will. His smirk faded into a scowl. You'll regret this. No, Mom said, her voice breaking for just a moment. I'll regret not doing it sooner. Jake stood there, chest heaving, fists clenching like he wanted to fight someone. But when he saw that no one, not a single person, was stepping in to defend him, his face twisted with rage. He grabbed his jacket off the chair, muttering curses under his breath, and stormed out the front door, slamming it so hard the picture frames rattled on the wall. The silence he left behind was deafening. My aunt stared at Mom like she'd grown another head. My cousins whispered to each other, still pretending they hadn't just witnessed a family implosion. Mom sat back down, her hands trembling as she reached for her water. I opened my mouth, unsure if I should thank her or apologize, but she stopped me with a look. You don't need to explain yourself to people who have already decided who you are, she said quietly. You've been fighting battles no one sees. And I'm sorry I let it get this far. Something in my chest cracked open. For years, I'd carried the weight of Jake's words, of other people's silent judgment. I tried to prove myself over and over, thinking maybe one day I'd earn their respect. But in that moment, I realized some people will never respect you, no matter what you do. And you don't need them to. I looked at Mom, her face still pale but her eyes fierce. You didn't have to do that, I said. Yes, I did, she replied. Because if I didn't, you'd still be sitting here believing his lies. I didn't know it yet, but that night was just the beginning. Jake wasn't the type to walk away quietly. And in the days that followed, he'd make it his mission to destroy what little I had left. But what he didn't know was that I'd been preparing for this fight my whole life. The night after the fight, the house felt too quiet. Mom had gone to bed early, and I sat at the kitchen table alone, staring at the slice of cake no one had touched. Every bite of it tasted like guilt. I knew Jake wouldn't just let this go. My brother didn't believe in losing, not in arguments, not in life. And when he felt cornered, he got dangerous. Sure enough, my phone buzzed at midnight. A text from an unknown number, but I knew his style instantly. Enjoy your little victory. You won't have a roof over your head by the end of the week. I clenched my fists. He was going to Mom's landlord, the man Jake had played poker with for years, and telling lies, maybe even offer to buy the house out from under her. That's how he worked. If he couldn't win face to face, he'd tear you apart from the shadows. The next morning, I woke to Mom's voice on the phone, shaky and nervous. What do you mean the rent's going up? That's double what I pay now. Her eyes met mine, and she ended the call, her lips pressed into a thin line. Jake's behind this, I said without hesitation. She didn't argue. He called the landlord last night. Told him I've got an unemployed squatter living here. That we're breaking the lease. It hit me like a punch to the gut. He wasn't just trying to hurt me, he was willing to take Mom down too, just to prove a point. I felt the anger building again, the same fire from the night before. Then we fight back, I said. Mom shook her head. Danny, you can't fight people like your brother the same way they fight you. You'll just end up becoming them. But I wasn't so sure she was right. Because the truth was, I'd been keeping a few things to myself. Things Jake didn't know about. Things that could ruin him if I chose to use them. And maybe, it was finally time. If you want, I can now move into section 3, where Jake escalates his attacks. And the protagonist starts plotting a counterstrike that flips the entire power dynamic. That's where the real he didn't expect to walk out instead payoff deepens into a long game twist. Do you want me to keep going? 2 days later, Jake showed up at Mom's doorstep without warning. He didn't knock, he never knocked, just pushed the door open like he still lived there. He wore that smug, self-satisfied grin, the one that always meant he thought he'd already won. Relax, he said, holding his hands up like he was doing us a favor. I'm here to make things right. I stood in the doorway between the kitchen and living room, arms crossed. You mean you're here to spin a new lie? He ignored me completely and looked at Mom. The landlord says you can stay, as long as Danny's gone by Friday. Mom's eyes flickered to me, and I could see the worry there. That was Jake's real weapon, not the lies, not the manipulation, but the way he could get into people's heads and make them believe they had no choice. I stepped forward. You've been calling me a loser for years, Jake. But you've never actually been brave enough to face me without having the upper hand first. So here's a thought. Why don't you take your threats, Anne? Danny. Mom's voice cut in, sharp and warning. She didn't want me saying something I couldn't take back. Jake smirked. That's what I thought. Still hiding behind Mom. I didn't bite. I just looked him dead in the eye and said, you should be careful about the things you've been hiding, too. That made his smile falter. Just for a second, but I saw it, that flicker of panic he tried to cover up. Because I wasn't bluffing. I knew things about Jake that he'd prayed no one in this family would ever hear. The kind of things that could turn him from the responsible son into the disgrace of the entire town. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. You don't have the guts. I smiled faintly. Try me. For the first time in years, I saw something I'd never seen in my brother's eyes before. Not anger. Not arrogance. Fear. The rest of that week felt like walking through a storm you couldn't see yet, but could hear rumbling in the distance. I knew Jake wouldn't just give up because I hinted at having dirt on him. If anything, that probably lit a fire under him. He'd want to strike before I had a chance to act. And sure enough, he did. It was Thursday morning, one day before his so-called deadline to have me out of Mom's house, when the first blow landed. Mom came into the kitchen, holding a folded piece of paper in her shaking hands. Danny, this came for you. I took it from her. My stomach dropped before I even read it. Official-looking envelope, return address from the county court. I unfolded it. Notice to appear, Small Claims Court. Plaintiff, Jacob Carter. My brother was suing me for unpaid personal loans totaling $7,800. I read the words twice, my mind reeling. He's claiming I owe him money I never borrowed, I said flatly. Mom's face twisted with hurt and disbelief. He's lying to the court? Danny, this could ruin your credit, your job prospects. I shook my head slowly. That's the point. He doesn't care if it's true. He just wants a public record saying I'm a deadbeat. And that's when I realized something about my brother. He didn't just want to win. He wanted me erased. But the thing is, I'd been underestimated my whole life. Jake thought I was some kind of harmless, down-on-my-luck loser who couldn't fight back. He didn't know that while he was busy showing off his paychecks and bragging at poker nights, I'd been quietly watching. Listening. Remembering. Because the truth is, Jake had secrets. And I wasn't the only one who knew them. That afternoon, I made a phone call I'd been putting off for months. It rang twice before a familiar voice answered. Danny Carter? Thought you swore you'd never talk to me again. Things change, I said. I need to talk about my brother. There was a long pause. Jake? Yeah. You're not the first one calling about him, the voice said darkly. It was Mark Lewis, a guy Jake used to work with before he got his current job at the construction firm. I'd heard whispers about why Jake left that old job, but he'd always spun it like he'd quit for better opportunities. The truth, if I remembered the rumors right, was uglier. Meet me tonight, I said. Somewhere quiet. I told Mom I had errands to run, then drove to a little diner on the edge of town. Mark was already there, sitting in a booth with a coffee in front of him. His eyes looked tired, older than I remembered, but when he saw me, something like relief flickered in them. We didn't waste time. He ever tell you why he left Henderson and Sons? Mark asked. He said the pay was too low. Mark gave a bitter laugh. Yeah, that's one version. The other version is that he was caught funneling company equipment into his own side business. power tools, lumber. You name it. He was selling them to contractors under the table. I froze. You're saying he stole from them? I'm saying they had enough proof to fire him on the spot. Could have pressed charges, too. But the owner was old friends with your dad, so they let him walk instead. Clean record. No lawsuit. Just gone. The weight of that hit me like a hammer. Jake had built his entire responsible older brother image on a lie. And now, if that truth came out, he'd lose more than just his reputation, he could lose his current job. Maybe even face legal trouble if old evidence resurfaced. Mark leaned in. Why do you want to know? Because he's trying to destroy me, I said simply. Mark studied me for a moment, then nodded. Then maybe it's time he learned what that feels like. I left the diner with a knot in my stomach, but it wasn't fear. It was resolve. The next morning, Friday, Jake came over, all puffed up with that false confidence that made people think he had the world in his pocket. Mom opened the door, but he brushed past her without so much as a hello. I'm here for your answer, he said to me, dropping an envelope on the table. Sign this agreement saying you'll leave the house by tonight, and I'll drop the lawsuit. Otherwise, we go to court, and I make sure everyone knows just how broke you are. I didn't pick up the paper. I just looked at him. You really think you're untouchable, don't you? Jake smirked. When have I ever not been? Funny thing about that, I said, standing up slowly. I had a little chat with someone from Henderson and Sons. The smirk faltered. Just a fraction, but I saw it. They told me an interesting story, I continued, my voice low and steady. About missing equipment. About sales that never hit the books. About how you were let go instead of arrested. His face drained of color. You don't know what you're talking about. Oh, I do. And so will your boss at the construction firm if I decide to make a few calls. Maybe even the police. You know, just to clear up the past. The room went dead silent except for the ticking of the clock on the wall. Mom's eyes darted between us, confusion and worry battling on her face. Jake swallowed hard, but tried to recover. You wouldn't. You've always been too soft. Maybe, I said. But I'm not stupid. And I'm not scared of you anymore. I slid the envelope back across the table toward him. You've got two choices, Jake. You leave me and Mom alone, drop the lawsuit, and stop your little games. Or I take everything I know and burn that perfect little image you've been selling to everyone. For the first time in years, my brother didn't have a comeback. He just stared at me, his jaw working like he wanted to speak but couldn't find the words. Finally, he grabbed the envelope, crumpled it in his fist, and stormed toward the door. He didn't slam it this time. He just left, quiet and seething. Mom turned to me, her face pale. Danny, what did you just do? I sat back down, feeling the adrenaline still buzzing in my veins. I stopped playing by his rules. What I didn't tell her was that I hadn't shown my full hand yet. I'd given Jake just enough to back him off for now. But I kept the real evidence safe. Because I knew my brother. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. For 2 weeks, the silence was deafening. No calls. No texts. No surprise visits. Jake had gone dark, which should have felt like relief, but it didn't. I knew my brother well enough to know he wasn't done. When Jake got quiet, it wasn't because he'd given up, it was because he was sharpening his next attack. It came on a Sunday afternoon. Mom was in the living room, flipping through old photo albums, when we heard tires crunching in the driveway. I looked out the window. Jake's truck. And he wasn't alone. He walked in without knocking, as usual, but this time, he brought company, a man in a pressed shirt carrying a leather briefcase. Jake's grin was wide, almost giddy. Danny, Mom, he said, drawing it out like he was the host of some big reveal. This is Mr. Collins. He's here to handle a little family business. The man nodded politely, then pulled a stack of papers from his briefcase. Mrs. Carter, I'm here on behalf of your mortgage holder. Your loan is being called due in full. Immediate payment or foreclosure proceedings begin in 30 days. Mom's face went white. What? I don't understand, my payments are current. Jake stepped in, pretending to explain. See, I did some digging, and technically, the bank can call the loan if they feel the property is at risk. And with Danny here, unemployed, getting into legal trouble, he gave me that smug look. Well, let's just say I made sure they knew the situation. I felt my blood run cold. This wasn't just about me anymore. He was threatening to take Mom's home. I stepped forward. Jake, you've crossed the line. He smirked. I told you I'd win, little brother. You can't beat me. That's when I heard a voice behind me. No, Jake. He already has. We all turned. Mom was standing now, holding her phone, her hand steady for the first time in this whole mess. What are you talking about? Jake scoffed. I'm talking about the email I just sent, she said, her eyes locked on him. To your boss. And to the Henderson and Sons board. And to the local sheriff's office. Jake's smirk faltered. Mom took a step closer. Danny told me everything. About the theft. About how you were let go before they could press charges. I didn't want to believe it at first, but then I called Mark Lewis myself. He confirmed it all. Every word. The silence was like a thunderclap. You didn't expect me to be the one to walk away from you, Jake, she said, her voice steel. But I'm done. You're not welcome in this house. Not until you learn the difference between family and an enemy. Jake looked between us like he couldn't quite process what had just happened. His arrogance was cracking, splintering into something smaller, panic. You wouldn't. I already did, Mom said flatly. Mr. Collins, you can leave. My son will not be harassed in his own home. The man hesitated, then quietly gathered his papers and stepped out. Jake stood there, red-faced, fists clenched. Then he turned, muttering something under his breath, and walked out the door without another word. No slam this time. Just, gone. That night, Mom and I sat at the kitchen table, the tension finally starting to lift. She reached over and took my hand. You've been carrying his cruelty for years, she said softly. But you never stopped being my son. And today, you showed me you're stronger than I ever realized. I swallowed the lump in my throat. I just wanted him to stop. And he will, she said. Because now he knows neither of us will ever let him treat you like that again. Sometimes the people who shout the loudest about your failures are just terrified you'll uncover their own. And the real victory isn't in shouting back, it's in standing so firm that their lies crumble under their own weight.